Alright, hey guys, it's Jocelyn and welcome back to my channel, Jocelyn Reads. And today I'm going to be doing my part 2 of my April wrap-up. I want to start off a bit more tame before I get into the kind of crazier shit that I read this month, because I did read a few things that I was just like, why did I read this? But at the same time, I continued series that I was like, why did I read this? So I'm going to start off a bit tame on my more tamer things that I read before I get into the crazier stuff. Because if this is the first time that you're watching my channel, I don't want to just jump into a video talking about alien smut. So we're going to start off a bit more tame with the new adult college romance series, and that was the Off Campus series by Elle Kennedy. I read this first book when I first downloaded it in 2019, and I could not get through the first 10%. So I DNF'd it in 2019, and then I always pick it up when I'm like in the middle of like a new adult mood. I always go to it to try to continue, and I DNF'd it then too. So I decided that this month I was going to pick it up and try to get through that first 10%. So the first book is called The Deal, and it follows two college students. One is named Hannah and the other is named Garrett, and Garrett is a hockey player. The off-campus series just follows a whole bunch of hockey players on the same team that go to the same college. So Garrett and Hannah are in the same philosophy class, and they just had this really hard midterm, and Hannah was pretty much the only person who passed it, and so Garrett failed it like everyone else, and he is kind of in a hard position because if this class drops his GPA, then it could have an effect on him playing hockey. He might not be able to play hockey because of his low GPA. So he decides that he wants Hannah to tutor him, but she is not for it. She feels like she's too busy to tutor him, and she just doesn't really like him as a person. So at first, Hannah is completely against the idea of tutoring Garrett until Garrett kind of finds out at a party that she likes this certain football player, and he decides that they should fake date so that he can get her to be his tutor, and she can make the football player jealous and kind of get his attention by seeing that she has other male attention, especially one from a super popular hockey player. And from there, a relationship kind of develops between them two, of course, as you would expect from any type of new adult novel. And yeah, for that synopsis, even the part about him wanting her to fake date him because he's this super popular hockey player and they'll get the football player's attention, even that part kind of put me off in the beginning when I started it. And it was just all very stereotypical new adult in the very beginning, where we have all these tropes. That's kind of a little bit of low-key slut shaming and the not like other girls type of new adult, like all the new adult themes that I don't like with the slut shaming and things like that. All of that was in the first 10% of this book, and I could not stand it. It was so cringy. Garrett is very, very cocky in the beginning of the book, and I never thought that I would like him, just because who talks about themselves like that? Like, obviously you can have confidence, but it was to a point where it was just like too much for me in the beginning, so that's why I kept DNFing it. In the beginning, I also DNF'd because I didn't like how Garrett was kind of very, like, he wasn't forceful in the sense like he was aggressive, but he was very persistent in wanting to get Hannah to tutor him after she had already said no. And I feel like he just didn't respect her boundaries because he felt like he was entitled to her help, and I did not like that, because he's not entitled to anything like, sir, go get a peer tutor. Like, you're in college, we have all these resources, like, why do you need her to tutor you? It was just like, it didn't make much sense to me that he was so hell-bent on getting her to tutor him. After you get past that, whatever, first like 30%, you actually see this really nice romantic relationship develop between the two, and it's done so genuinely. This one, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was hate to love, but it was more like a dislike to love. This really clever banter between each other, obviously because they dislike each other at first, and Hannah's trying to get him off her back at first, and so they kind of go tit for tat with each other, and it's literally so cute. And I think they have a whole bunch of sexual chemistry as well as romantic chemistry, and it all came together so well in the end, and I am really surprised that I ended up getting this 4 stars. I don't even think I got to tell you, I gave it 4 stars. The next book in the series is called The Mistake, and like I said before, this series just follows all the hockey players and kind of the girls' friends and things like that. So it's everyone on the same college campus, and definitely always a hockey player that is involved. So this book followed Logan and Grace, and Logan is kind of in a weird place in his life because he is Garrett's best friend from the first book, and he kind of watched Garrett and Hannah fall in love, and he felt as though he loved Hannah because of him getting to know her as he was with Garrett. So he's in this weird place in his life. So he's, in order to kind of get over that love for Hannah, he's seeking out a lot of sex with people, and he is going to a lot of parties and getting really drunk because he doesn't want to be at home, as him and Garrett are roommates, and he always sees Hannah there being with Garrett, and it just kind of makes him uncomfortable because he thinks that he has feelings for her. So in one of these nights where he's going off to get drunk, he tries to go to this party on campus, and he ends up finding himself at Grace's dorm because he thought that's where it was going to be, and it ends up not being so. And Logan ends up spending a lot of time with her, and they kind of seem like they're going on the right track, and then he ends up stupidly saying that she is kind of helping him get over Hannah in a way. So Grace breaks it off after that because she feels as though he's used her in order to get over another girl, and that he never really had feelings for her, and she feels really hurt by it. So she ends up with him, and then he realizes that he really did like Grace, and he never liked Hannah like he liked Grace, and so he's hell-bent on getting her back. and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This was a bit more disappointing, and I think it's just because once you read one book in this series, you've pretty much read them all. All of these hockey players are pretty much the exact same person. They're all very cocky, confident, think they can get any girl that they want. They all have a lot of sex, and it's just pretty much the same person. You're reading about the same romance over and over, so it can get stale very quickly. So there wasn't anything new brought to the table romance-wise, but there is always something new brought to the table in which you explore some type of real-world issue that the characters are going through together. And so in this book, you are exploring Logan's relationship with his alcoholic father. He has a father who owns a business in town, and he is an alcoholic, and so Logan and his brother pretty much have to take care of him. Logan's brother basically lives with their dad because someone has to be there all the time with him, and he has this deal with Logan that when Logan graduates from college, he's gonna have to switch with his brother because his brother's life has been put on hold for long enough. And so you explore this idea of Logan feeling trapped after college and having these plans that he can be, like being a professional hockey player, but those have to be put on hold for his father. And though we get a lot of like alcoholic fathers in New Adult, and we explore relationships where their fathers are terrible and they beat them and things like that, like very dramatic New Adult, I think Elle Kennedy did a really good job toning that down and really genuinely delving into the relationship between an alcoholic father and his son, and not just doing it for theatrics. And I think that was the really first time that I read a New Adult book where it seems very genuine and raw, rather than just having that parent there to have conflict and to have a villain, because they do end up discussing their relationship and things like that, and I felt that that was very genuine. So the next book that I read was The Score by Elle Kennedy. It's the 3rd book in the series, and this one follows Allie and Dean is another hockey player, and Allie is Hannah's best friend. And I was planning to do this wrap up, and I was kind of getting my thoughts together on each book. I realized that for this book, these 2 characters had the most memorable personalities. Elle Kennedy did a really good job of developing these characters and setting them apart from the other people in the series, just because, like I said, we are following these hockey players that pretty much all have the same personality. But Dean himself stood out a bit because he was more on the sullen side, and he was very kind of badass in the sense that he separated himself from others, and he was just less open and goofy as the rest of them. So this book follows Allie and Dean, who end up hooking up one night, and Dean has this reputation of being this kind of player who hurts girls, and Allie has this reputation of being a nester. So she really like falls in love really fast, and so their friends have told them to stay away from each other just because it's just a recipe for disaster. And so once they hook up, they want to keep it from their friends, but they also want to keep hooking up because they really like what they do together. So they go through this whole thing of trying to hook up but keep it away from their friends, and we just follow it from there, and you watch the romance develop from there. And I think it was really well done. This is probably the best developed romance out of the series, just because they spend so much time together, and they spend so much time together in secret that you can see the feelings kind of developing, because at first it's just supposed to be a no strings attached, friends with benefits type of thing, and because of that there's a lot of tension between them, and you can see the feelings developing, so it doesn't feel like the romance is rushed in any way. And they also just had a lot of chemistry together. Obviously at first it was sexual chemistry, and then that evolved into something else, and watching that evolution was really nice to see, and I think it was probably the best done in the series. The only reason I gave this 3 stars is because it is still kind of a similar story to the other 2. So if this one was the first story, I probably would have given it 4 stars, but because I had read the other 2 before it, and it was kind of the same type of thing with the hockey and things like that, it just fell a little bit flat for me. So the last book in the series is called The Goal, and this book follows Tucker and Sabrina, and this is probably my least favorite book in the series. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. So in this book, Tucker and Sabrina kind of meet in a bar, and Sabrina has some past history with one of the other hockey players that was on the team, and everyone just sees her as a very harsh, kind of bitchy character, just because she is very hell-bent on her studies and becoming a lawyer, and she doesn't come off as the sweetest person. And so that night they end up going to his car and hooking up like they do in every single one of these stories, but it's New Adult college romance. What else can you really expect? And from there, Tucker is really intrigued by Sabrina, and Sabrina kind of wants to just forget about Tucker, but he's actively seeking her out to kind of have some sort of relationship with her. And it turns out that Sabrina ends up pregnant, and this is not a spoiler. It tells you at the very end of the 3rd book, and that's the whole premise of this book. And so they end up having to kind of deal with that situation together. For me, this one was not a very believable romance. I did not see why Tucker was so intrigued by Sabrina enough to pursue a relationship other than the sexual relationship that they had, and I just didn't really see the chemistry between these 2 characters, because even though Hannah pushed Garrett away at first, there was still some type of banter between them where you could see that there was chemistry there. For me, with Tucker and Sabrina, there wasn't really chemistry there. Sabrina genuinely seemed like she didn't want to be with Tucker. She thought he was attractive, but I don't think she was intrigued by him in any sort of substantial romantic way. I did like Tucker as a character because he was a bit different than the other three characters in the sense that he was a lot more sweet. But some things that did annoy me and made me drop a star rating was the fact that Sabrina was very standoffish and questioning of Tucker's intentions after a long time of them being together, especially after they had the baby. And to me, it just didn't make any sense because Tucker never gave her a reason to act that way, especially after a lot of time had passed, because it was just very, very obvious that Tucker had feelings for her and she continued to question it and be standoffish. So much so to the point where she stayed in this home where she kind of had this abusive relationship with her stepfather, who was very gross towards her, and she had her baby in that situation. I felt like that wasn't safe. And there was just an obvious better place for her to be with Tucker, and she decided not to do that, and it just didn't make sense. So while I'm on 2-star reads, I think I'm gonna bounce back to this 1-star read that I read. This is actually the first new adult book that I read this month, but I didn't want to start off with it because it was a bit taboo, and now that you guys got to know me a bit, I think I can go ahead and get into it. So this book was called Torn by Carrie Ann Cole. Now I went into the book knowing that it was a taboo romance, but I didn't know the extent to which it was taboo. So this book is a dad's best friend and the dad's daughter relationship, and I actually used to read a lot of those on Wattpad, so it was nothing that I was new to. But for me, typically the dad's best friend trope that I read is when a girl comes back from like college and she meets her dad's best friend that he made while he was there, and he's usually on the younger side and they're attracted to each other, something like that. Something that they didn't really know each other before. This one was way different and it was way more taboo than I expected, and I should have known it from reading the synopsis, but I didn't read the synopsis, and I typically don't read synopses, and this is one time where it came back and bit me in the ass. So in this one, the dad's best friend practically raised her, in the sense that her dad is a musician and he was on the road a lot, and when her dad was on the road, her dad's best friend actually just ended up raising her. So that to me already made me uncomfortable, but I felt like I could have gotten on board with it if it didn't show you the process. Like, it was something that was just spoken about once and then it went away, even though it still would have been weird to me. But for this, the author like made sure that you knew that this person was basically a father to her. Like, she would interweave, is interweave a word? We're gonna say it is. So she would interweave the story of Torin, the dad's best friend, and Kenzie, like touring and raising Kenzie throughout the story of them falling in love. And do you know how just weird that is? Like, it literally just didn't make any sense to me that I could ever like be shipping them after she shows me him raising her throughout. It never says that Torin was attracted to Kenzie as a child. They say that there was always this connection there, and it kind of reminded me of Renesmee and Jacob, and we all know how weird that was. Like, and we never got to see it, thank God, but this is what it would have been like if we did see it. But there was no paranormal aspect there, so I wasn't sure what that connection was, and honestly it couldn't have been anything other than pedophilia. Like, what else could that connection have been? Like, I don't get it, how then it turned into something that was romantic. Like, I just did not get it. All right, and since we're on the topic of weird shit and taboo shit, I might as well just go to the next thing that I read, which was Ice Planet Barbarians, and there's nothing to say other than that this is alien smut. I see you looking at me like that. Please stop. I know y'all read it too. If you're watching this and you're a new adult reader, you had to have read Ice Planet Barbarians. Like, been pretty hyped on BookTube recently, and Mina actually did a video reading this series, so I'll link it up above if you want to go and see more in-depth thoughts about this. But I read the first 3 books in the series and I surprisingly enjoyed them. I did not rate them because they don't have much of a plot to them, so I feel weird rating them because there's nothing else there other than alien smut, and it's just like, book has a trigger warning for rape and assault, but not in a romantic relationship, just to get that out the way. So this book starts off with Georgie being abducted by aliens, and she is put in this little ship with all these other women there as well, and they seem to have been taken in order to be sold. And so all of these women kind of plan a revolt together while they're on the ship, and they end up carrying it out, and the ship crashes on this other planet, and all of these women are left here in this cold, freezing planet, and they're all starving and have been treated poorly by the aliens that they were abducted by. And so they're just all in this very vulnerable state while they're there, and they're also freezing and they don't have any clothes. So they send Georgie out to kind of find something to help them while they're there. And while Georgie is out wandering this planet, she finds this alien named Vectol. And from there, a romance ensues. And it just sounds crazy and ridiculous, and it is, but it's actually very, very fun, very addictive, and the culture of the aliens themselves was actually fun to learn, and I definitely would recommend it. Alright, so I just have 3 more books to talk about, and the last 3 that I have to talk about are by Katie Roberts, who is it Katie Robert or Katie Roberts? I don't know, but it'll say it on the screen, and she has quickly become one of my favorite new adult / erotica authors just because she can write a sex scene. That's all I have to say. She truly can. And it was called Theirs for the Night, and it was a male-male female romance, and it was also a novella. So this book starts off with a girl who is picked up by a prince who she doesn't know he's a prince, and his bodyguard from a club, and they kind of have this one-night stand. So it literally just takes place in that one night. It's literally so short and it's so good. I think that Katie Roberts is an expert at writing sexual tension and things around that nature. She gives you these 3 distinct personalities and then works them in a way to show you how they fit together both physically and romantically in a sense. Even though you only get it for that one night in the first book, you can definitely see the potential that they would have romantically. So in these 3 distinct personalities, you get a bodyguard who is pretty dark and broody, and he's obviously the protector of the prince. Even though Meg herself doesn't know that they are a prince and a bodyguard, you can clearly see this protective relationship between the two, especially on the side of the bodyguard, and he's just kind of standoffish and more closed off. And then you get the prince, who is more open. He's also very much more goofy than the bodyguard, but he is still dominant and very serious in a way as well. Like, he has this very weird dynamic in the sense that he kind of flips personalities, and it's really cool to see. And then you have Meg, who's just a bit of a brat, and to me personally, I always love a brat main character. Like, I know it can get tiring if it's not done well, but a well-written brat, in my opinion, is just so fun to read about. So I really like this one, and I ended up liking it so much that I picked up the full-length novel that this was a prequel to, and this one was called Forever Theirs, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I don't know if I said how much I gave the last one. I gave that one 4 5 stars. I didn't rate it initially, but I ended up giving it like something around 4.5 because I felt like I really liked it, so I wanted to give it a rating. So that one was 4.5 stars, and this one was 3 stars. So I enjoyed everything that I mentioned about the last one and this one. It was the exact same relationship, just expanded on more. And yeah, I gave it 3 stars because of the plot. For me, it just seemed unrealistic, as in this one you are now like 1 year in the future, and the prince comes back to kind of want to be with Meg and ends up putting her in a dangerous situation because he is more of like a runaway prince type of thing, and he's in a dangerous situation. So the people who are after the prince try to come after Meg, and they end up having to go on this adventure to protect Meg in a way. But the things that they had to do in order for him to become the prince, they could have done together in that 1 year that they were away from Meg. So it just didn't make any sense to me, and so the plot was pretty flat, and all I really cared about was their romantic relationship. So because of that, I ended up giving it 3 stars. If you would have took out all the plot and just given me their romantic relationship, it probably would have been a 4. So the last no book that I read this month was also by Katie Roberts, and it was called Learn My Lesson, and this was also a male-male female romance. I really like her male-male female romances, actually. So this one is book 2 in her Wicked Villain series, and I haven't read book 1, but I read book 2 because it was recently 99 cents. I think it went back up, but recently it was 99 cents, so I got it when it was that price. And so this book follows Meg from Hercules. I don't know why both of her characters are named Meg, but it follows Meg from Hercules, and then it follows Hades, and it follows Hercules. And so we start off with Meg and Hades in this diner, and they so clearly have this kind of dominant sub relationship. And so Hades sends Meg to go pick up Hercules, who is the waiter, and so Meg does so, and you kind of start this romance between all 3 of them, and it is so well done. I like the character dynamics between these 3 characters way more than the last 3, just because you have Meg, who is a switch, so she is a submissive to Hades, but then she's also a dominant to Hercules, and you have Hercules, who is literally the most innocent being ever. Like, I love Hercules. I know a lot of the times I don't like soft characters, but the way Hercules is portrayed, like, you have no reason but to love him. And so then I also liked Hades, who was pretty much the same little dark broody, like who you would expect Hades to be, dark and broody and very much in control and dominant. So you have Hercules, who is just a sub, you have Meg, who's a switch, and you have Hades, who is a dom. And that relationship, top notch, such good quality, and everything about them together is just insane. Like, it's just so well done. I ate the shit up like candy. Like, the dynamic between these characters is pretty much just one of my favorites that I've read in new adult, honestly. So if you read any of Katie Roberts' books that I recommended out of these 3, it would be this one. This is the one that I would recommend the most out of the 3 because it was just so good, honestly. For all of the new adult books that I read this month, they were pretty decent, but I'm hoping for better ones this month. I definitely will do another wrap up like this next month. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and all those things down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!